Well, hello, I'm here with Doug to talk about phone hacking and other things. And it's Friday, December 6th, 2024. So, what have you got, Doug?
Sam, so let's talk about Intel. This is the big news. Remember that big chip maker that's behind all the chips that Microsoft
Well, yeah, and
depends on?
apparently going broke or something, right?
Yeah, so they hired a new CEO about 2 years ago, and suddenly yesterday he announced his retirement after a board meeting.
I've been hearing disastrous financial reports
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
and also technical failures of the product. There have been serious
yes.
defects in the last couple of generations of chips.
Kind of sounds like Boeing, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, yeah. So what's interesting about this is two little uh, two little keynotes or two important points here is what I'll put. So he retired immediately. What's interesting is that there's no replacement that's been announced. So not Boeing, sorry, I was going to make a joke here, but Intel's flying with no pilot right now. Nobody's at the helm.
I didn't know corporations ever did without a CEO. I thought the board of directors would appoint someone.
Well, yeah, so there's nobody that's been groomed. There's nobody that's willing to that's set up to take over. And the current CEO, or rather the CEO that just retired, had been groomed to do it, and he had background with Intel. So he had a lot of knowledge about it. This sure looks like the Titanic is sunk, and they're trying to bring in another captain who will say, "Oh, the ship's not sinking."
Are they planning on just selling the company or something?
Nobody knows,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But the other point that I want to bring up is that this is after Intel received 8 billion, that's $8 billion to develop new chip factories in the US.
Uh,
And I believe they're under construction in Arizona and they won't be open for a couple more years.
so maybe they're too big to fail. Maybe they need to prop them up to finish that.
Yeah, but they don't have a product.
And who's making everything we use now? AMD?
No, so the Taiwan chip manufacturer, do you
Oh,
know who that is?
NTSC or something?
Yeah, something like that.
Some kind of four-letter acronym for the Taiwanese Semiconductor Manufacturing Company.
Yeah, yeah.
We really don't
And
want to be importing all our chips from Taiwan anymore.
no, but I believe they also received money to build a
Right.
fab factory in Arizona as well.
Yeah, I think I heard that. But people
Yeah,
say
I'll tell you,
years before it actually produces product, though, right?
I think they've already got one factory that's open or very close. Um, Market Talk or Market Watch, whatever the PBS show,
Yeah.
uh, and had an interview with people, and they're training people to work in the fab factories. I'll tell you, if you want a job, go to Arizona
Yeah.
because there are construction jobs and there'll be tech jobs there.
No, I'm glad if we're making chips because the situation politically with China is getting outrageous.
Yeah, but if Intel is gone, there's going to be a factory, and what's going to happen?
Have to make a lot more factories.
Well, Intel's got to make a product that's worth it, right?
Well, yeah.
Worthwhile.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All
Yeah.
right, so that's the big news I think
Yeah.
of this week. And a while back, Intel stock was delisted, and Nvidia took over or took that spot on the stock exchange.
Yeah. Well, I got the one I thought was the big news, which
Okay,
is the Chinese hacking the phone network. This just keeps getting worse and worse. In
so
October, we found out that Chinese had hacked all the ISPs, and they've reported recently that they haven't even ejected the bad guys yet. They don't have any estimate for when they will succeed in ejecting them. So they're still just in there stealing stuff, and they can't figure out how to take them out, which is pretty appalling incident response. And in response, the government is making amazing recommendations. Like the FBI actually told people to use encrypted apps like Signal, which up
yeah,
until now they've always said, don't do that because then we can't spy on you. But now they said, it's really insecure what's going on at the phone company. And so um, it's now people are, and also a company made an app to scan an iPhone for infections called I could find the name of this thing somewhere, mobile security firm. I actually tried to download it called iVerify or something like that. And
Okay.
anyway, they found thousands of infections of Pegasus all over the place, not just political figures, but tech figures, just business figures. So apparently, this Pegasus spyware from Israel is just being deployed widely on both Android and iOS. And so people are now getting anti-malware for iPhones to detect it, which I didn't even know that existed. And so
Yeah.
that's one thing. And so Ron Wyden, who's always on top of all this stuff, the senator from Silicon Valley or congressman from Silicon Valley, is now made it a letter asking for the Pentagon to investigate their phone systems and see if they're secure because there's pretty good reason to assume they are not.
Hmm.
And
Interesting.
yeah, and so the FBI also warned people to prepare for AI deepfakes of voices, which have been fooling people. They say what you have to do is when you're talking to someone about something important, hang up and call them back at a known good phone number to make sure it's really them. And also, you should make a secret word with all your friends or your family so that if they call you asking for money, you can ask for the secret word to make sure it's really them because you won't be
Yeah.
able to tell from the sound of their voice or anything. So and one thing I discovered when reading the articles about all this latest tempest about the phone company is that Kalia, see, I've been telling students for years what I thought was true is Kalia uh, forces phone companies to enable wiretaps for police for telephone calls, but not for internet traffic. But I'm wrong. That was extended to internet traffic in 2008 and approved, apparently. So apparently there are now wiretap orders to monitor your internet use and man in the middle it, and all the ISPs have to provide that, and that's what got hacked into. And I did not know that at all, and I've not seen any articles about this kind of evidence being used in court or anything.
Well, Sam, let me tell you, this gets worse.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this about data brokers. Data brokers are allowed to sell your personal information, including your full social security number,
Yeah.
driver's license numbers.
Oh, yeah, I know that. That's what mine's all been leaked out by the NPD data.
Uh,
So that's
but
everybody.
the data brokers are able to sell that information,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and profit from it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, this, I think, uh, one of my friends, I asked this question. Why do we have 100 apps on our phone? Why don't we just have one browser and go to websites? That's what you do
Yeah,
on your computer. Well, as far as I know, the only reason you have all those apps is so they can collect your data and sell it. I mean, what?
yeah, yeah. And I'll tell you, we we have iPhones. My family and I, we have iPhones,
Yeah,
and we've been talking about different things. And this rumor about your iPhone is listening to you, that Apple's collecting your information. Apple denies it. And it's my understanding that apps that you load on your phone could be doing it. So Apple isn't doing it, but the apps are doing it. And we were talking about going to Antarctica is sort of a joke, but now we're getting ads for voyages to Antarctica.
yeah. I know. I've heard this
So,
many times. I haven't
yeah,
seen a strict scientific test of it, but many people feel like it is, in fact, listening to you and targeting you with ads based on what you say.
yeah,
Um, of course, it's hard to ever be sure because if you talk about something, maybe somebody you know on Facebook said something about it or something. So there might be indirect ways they found out. But I've heard a lot of people claim this, that they didn't put anything online. And when you talk about something, you see ads. And it sure is creepy for me. I mean, every time I watch a YouTube video, I see ads for the RSA conference and stuff. So they
yeah,
totally know everything
yeah.
about me and target it very specifically to what I'm doing.
But that is you're interacting with the computer.
Well, that's
This
right.
is
Yeah.
this is a conversation in a room.
Yeah.
So no computer interaction, nothing with Antarctica.
I've heard this a lot of times,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to prove it's not happening. I felt like you could easily do this as like a class project. Have people go in a room and read like 10 things from a list of things they never think about, and then see if they get edge, and have another group of people, not have a phone in the room when they do that and see if they get edge.
right, right,
It'd be kind
right,
of nice to
right.
do that experiment.
Yeah. So, we'll see. We'll see. This is just kind of getting more uncomfortable for people, I think.
Well, it'd be nice if we had privacy laws in America. I mean,
Yes, it would.
they could just resell it, and I think what's going to happen is Europe is passing these laws, and they're going to force all the companies to knock it off from Europe.
Yeah, Europe is kind of the new California for consumer data privacy or consumer privacy rights,
They are.
consumer
They are.
rights.
And
Yeah.
they're passing lots of internet regulations which we can't pass. And then, of course, when your companies have to change their product to conform with European laws, they pretty much use the same product in America.
Yeah.
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 All right.
All right. I got an Apple story for you.
Right.
Did you hear about this one? Six now former, I guess should say, Apple employees were arrested, facing felony charges over charitable donations and donation matching by Apple.
I did not hear this.
No.
How's that a
So
felony?
this is $150,000 divided between the six of them. That's roughly about $30,000 each. So for a number of years, what they were doing was a charitable donation to an organization, and Apple would match, and the donation that the individual gave would be given back
Hmm.
to the individual. So
Match. Okay.
the charitable company got the money,
Oh, okay.
and the individual, so Apple was out the money without the match, is
Right.
what this comes down to. And so they're facing felony charges. Not too smart over $30,000.
Yeah, well,
If you
that's
it,
fraud. Yeah.
it's fraud, but if you're going to do fraud like that, let's at least get into the billions, right?
Well, there's a whole population of dumb criminals that get caught. That's mostly what,
Yeah.
like anything else, most of the perpetrators are the small fry that don't do a good job.
Yeah. All right, what do you have for me next?
So, Stanford researchers have warned that most people that have electric vehicles charge them overnight at home, which is, of course, what I would
True.
do. Well,
Yeah.
and they say this is a huge problem because I didn't know this. The grid has most of the demand at night. And also in the daytime, it has all that solar power, which is gone at night. So they say this is the worst thing you could do because it increases the peak demand for electricity. It means you have to build up the grid to increase the peak production. Whereas if you would just charge them in the daytime, then it would be when there's low need for it. I said, well, good luck with that. I mean, you're using your car in the daytime. You can't. But anyway, they say that's going to be a huge problem and increase the amount of extra grid we have to build. Now, I'm hearing numbers like our grid needs to make 5 times, 10 times as much power as it makes now to keep up with the demands that are coming.
Okay, so I am going to challenge that. I don't think that that's correct. And let me just share my logic thinking process on this.
Yeah.
But right now, PG&E has the lowest hours, and this goes for the big companies, PGE, San Diego, LA. The lowest prices for electricity is at nighttime between 11 and 7 a.m.
Yeah, they said something about that. They said PG&E should
Yeah.
adjust their pricing not to do this. Uh, I know I didn't quite understand that either.
Okay.
Um,
So that's data point number one.
yeah.
Number two is PG&E. It is correct that they have excess electricity, or the Western grid has excess electricity due to all the solar, and PG&E has to sell that. So you are correct. During the day, it makes sense to do it. But PG&E also goes on to what are called peaker rates. And the peaker rates are when PG&E or the power companies incorrectly um, incorrectly estimated how much power would be used as a specific time. Those are always in the evening between 5 and 8, these peaker rates.
Oh,
And
so 5 and 8 that's probably what they're talking about, 5 and 8. That
no,
makes
yeah,
sense
but
what you're saying.
this is happening right now. The PG&E will have an announcement to cut back,
Yeah.
and it might be for an hour from 5 to 6, 6 to 7. Sometimes it's 2, 3 hours.
Yeah. Well, yep.
So,
I couldn't understand this, and they have graphs that confuse me. So anyway, that's what they
okay.
make, but I don't quite understand it.
So
Yeah, I agree.
maybe they're projecting over
Yeah.
the next 10 years.
I don't know. It's it
Yeah.
it's strange. That's why I don't understand it. Hopefully, there'll be more articles up from someone that can actually understand what they're saying here. They have some graphs that make it look like the peak is in the daytime. So I don't get it.
Well, the peak should be during late afternoon. And it's going to change throughout the year, but during the summer months, everybody has air conditioning on, right? Late afternoon. And you come home, you turn your air conditioner on, you start cooking,
Well, they
right?
got yep, they have a graph, but it has something called time of day hours, and it shows basically a Gaussian peaking at what looks like 10 a.m. So I don't understand any of this.
That doesn't make sense to me.
No, that's why I I guess I don't know what to make of this article.
Okay.
Somebody's gonna have to
Okay.
figure it out. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
uh,
All right. Well, I got one for you. This is
yeah,
an interesting one. Airbnb. Ever stayed in an Airbnb?
I have.
Okay. And you go to an Airbnb, you make a reservation. Sometimes the Airbnb say minimum 7 nights,
Oh, I didn't know
seven
that.
nights stay. Yeah. So, I understand it's a business model, but
Yeah.
on TikTok and other social media, there there are videos telling people this is how you don't have to pay. So what they do is they say, okay, book the reservation that you have. If the minimum stay is 7 nights or 14 nights, book it. So you make the reservation, you go to the Airbnb, right? You check in, you say, okay, everything's great. And then you write to the host and you say, it's filthy dirty here. I see bed bugs. Somebody didn't clean. It's horrible. I can't stay here more than one night.
Oh,
So you leave the second you check out in the morning, or you don't check out rather. You go to Airbnb saying, I can't stay here. There are bed bugs. Here are pictures. Here's things are dirty, things are filthy. I'm leaving. I want all my money back. So even though they might have a 14-night stay, Airbnb says, "Oh, okay, we'll side with the customer. Here's all your money back." And the host is out the money plus the cleaning fees plus everything else. And we've
this is
seen
not.
so far
Yeah.
dirty tap water or contaminated tap water, bed bugs, unclean sheets, food left behind, all kinds of claims.
Well, this is not going to work. I mean, I'm
It's
sure.
working.
Well, I'm sure Airbnb has a reputation score, and if you do this more than a couple times, they'll flag you as a bad tenant. I would.
So what happens is the host, if they try and post a negative, review of the guest, Airbnb takes that down, but the guest can post a notice or a review, and that can be a 1 star, which then takes the 5 star or high, close to 5 star down a couple notches.
Well, they just need to fix that. I know
Yeah,
Uber and Lyft rate both the customer and the driver,
correct.
which
Yeah.
is what you should do. The host should be able to see your rating as a client and decide whether to rent to you.
Okay. So here's what's going on is the clients are usually first time guests, second time guests.
Yeah.
So, they're flopping accounts around. I don't know how easy it is to do that. I'm assuming it's based on an email address.
Yeah. Yeah, but okay. I mean, it just seems like they could adjust their system to handle this because I think Uber and Lyft have the same problem. Sometimes the driver makes trouble, sometimes the customer makes trouble.
Yeah.
And you have to,
Yeah.
in both cases, find the bad guys and filter them out.
Yeah, but a lift, a ride, which might be, $20, $50, something like that, isn't that big a deal. But here you have a host that might be out 5,000 or a
Yeah.
couple $1,000,
Yeah.
depending on what the stay is.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a problem. Of course, also you can have an objective proof that it wasn't true. They can go there and say, look, there are no bed bugs, the place is not dirty. So they ought to be able to sort of prove who's wrong.
That's been done, and Airbnb always sides with the guest.
Well, they just need to fix that policy. That's the problem.
And so far they haven't.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Well, then they'll continue to be abused until they fix the policy, just like
e-
everything else.
exactly. So Airbnb hosts are complaining about it.
Well, yeah, and rightly so. I guess if you
Yeah.
is there some alternative to Airbnb if you want to rent out your place?
There's VRBO, which I think is kind of a little bit more loosey-goosey in terms of, I know there's more fraud that's on VRBO, or at least in the past.
Oh,
So,
Well, this
you
is why we're
know,
not supposed to have monopolies. You're supposed to be alternative companies just for this reason.
yeah, 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 yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Give me another story. You
Well,
got one more?
oh yeah,
Couple more?
yeah, I got a couple more simple ones. This one is pretty amazing. I never thought of this, but I should have because I got my PhD for discovering molecular tunneling. But inside the nucleus, the protons and neutrons are all packed in tightly, and in addition to being held in by a strong nuclear force, they are entangled in a quantum mechanical sense, which they have finally proven. And I never thought of that. And somehow they do high energy collisions, and from the pattern of the products that come spewing out, they're able to prove that the protons in there were correlated. And so they have quantum mechanical, entanglement in addition to the other ways they're connected together, which introduces a whole new world of interesting quantum mechanics inside the nucleus. We're only beginning to find out what's going on inside the nucleus. The strong force has been really, really very vaguely described for my whole life because there was no way to probe inside the nucleus and only operates at very short distances. But now they're reaching that in particle accelerators, ways to probe inside and show that the structure of the nucleus is complicated and interesting.
So is this coming from CERN?
I'm not sure if it's CERN, but a particle collider.
Yeah, okay, okay.
But
So
anyway,
we have electron entanglement,
right, that we know
right?
about. That's the most common type that affects chemistry and stuff. But inside the nucleus, it's pretty much just been a black box, just like up to this distance, the strong force holds things together. And what's going on inside there, we haven't had any way to know.
Yeah, and the only way that we've been able to kind of put a model together is just by strictly observation, right?
Yeah, observation from the outside, and
Yeah,
they do have theoretical models of the strong force, but they just say the strong force goes over this distance, and after that, it doesn't matter.
yeah,
Now we're
yeah,
finally getting more details about it.
yeah. Interesting, huh?
Yeah, yeah. No
Interesting.
immediate application right away, but it's an effect which in retrospect I should have thought of that. That's kind of obvious, but I never thought of it. And apparently a lot of other people didn't think of it too, that there's quantum mechanical entanglement in there. And by the way, to be fair, we don't really know what goes on at that scale at all. We don't really know that any of the laws of physics we deduced from experiments at a larger scale really apply at that scale.
Yeah, yeah. And just so everybody knows, right? We have Newtonian physics, which is the world that we're surrounding us.
Right.
But once you get down to the atomic level, Newtonian physics don't seem to apply
Well, Newtonian physics fails in two
loosely.
areas. If you start getting heavy or fast, then you get relativity, general and
Yeah,
specific. And if you start looking at small scales, you get quantum mechanics. Things don't really have a location. And actually, it affects things in real life too. When you throw a copper switch to turn on the lights, it turns out that that copper has a layer of oxide on the outside that is more it costs more energy to climb over that barrier than you have in the power line, and that those electrons are in fact tunneling through that barrier.
interesting. And that's why switches fail over time.
Well, eventually, I guess, because the corrosion builds up until they can't tap
Yeah,
anymore. But the only reason switches
yeah,
ever work is apparently because of quantum mechanics.
right.
And
Yeah,
uh, and that's something that
yeah,
people didn't always appreciate. So I mean, it has some subtle effects, even at our daily life. But usually, our daily life is mostly Newtonian physics. Yeah.
yeah. So a lot of the switches that are used like in computer cases and electronics and just daily life, those little micro switches, it's interesting because they clean themselves. So when the switches come, they don't come together, but they kind of glide across each other, and that's to get rid of that pitting.
Probably a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Give me another one.
Well, I got one more, which is just speculation, but this is what Elon Musk is now running this Doge committee to cut government waste, and he wants to cut Medicare and Social Security and possibly the military and all kinds of things because there's no way they can really cut $2 trillion out of America's budget without touching those items. And so, but what
Yeah,
he's almost, but the thing is, Elon Musk companies live on government funding. Tesla and Starlink and everything are largely funded by government grants, and SpaceX especially. So right now, one of the first things they're criticizing is a government grant to Rivian, a Tesla competitor. So you should
right.
throw this money away on them. So there's a huge conflict of interest. And Sam Altman is afraid he's going to do it in the field of AI, which he certainly would want to. He's in fact suing OpenAI, saying they have no right to go public. And he's trying to crush OpenAI because they wouldn't let him be the boss. And he was an early investor. And after a while, he said, okay, I want to be in charge. And they wouldn't let him be in charge. So he rage quit and said, they're not moral enough. They're making dangerous models and they're violating their plan to make everything open source. When in fact, what he means is they wouldn't let me be in charge. And so anyway, now but Sam Altman said, well, I don't think he'll do a bad thing. I think we can trust him to not use this position of government cost cutting to just crush his opponents and make more money come to him. That would be going full supervillain, and he won't do that. And everybody that knows him is saying, no, he's totally going to do that. You're dreaming.
Tell tell Sam Altman to put that into Chat GPT and see what comes out.
That's right. I know. Well, and we're going to find out. But I certainly think that Elon Musk will do it. And he's already started doing stuff like naming specific government workers on Twitter so that his whole mob can harass them and drive them from home because he thinks their job is wasteful. So he is a full supervillain, has been for years. He's just a
Yeah.
monster destroying people's lives casually because he can. He's just like the king of the earth, just trampling down the peasants and laughing at them, and has a mob of people that worship him, just like Donald Trump, who does the same thing. I mean, I guess it's sort of like these women that love like murderers in prison. Being a successful criminal makes you popular with a certain group of people.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting, huh?
Well, I think it's probably evolutionary, right? Because in the wild, right, the one buck they fight and one guy wins, and when he wins, then everybody follows him. So you become the leader just by trampling the opponent by fair means or foul. It
Yeah.
shows strength and victory or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me kind of continue along this line, if you will. This goes back to World War II. And, that was what, 80 years ago that the war ended.
Yeah.
And documents are being released that are coming out. And the documents so far are painting a pretty bad picture. They're not clear yet. So let me make sure we're clear on that. But that the British royalty was involved. And in terms of profiting from the war, and it turns out that the British may have looted a lot of royals' jewelry from other parts of Europe, like Hungary and the Dutch, royalty jewels and things belonging that went back hundreds of years has disappeared. And it's unclear, but there's a paper trail that's being released where if you kind of start putting the dots together or putting the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together, it's painting a picture that doesn't look too good for the British and the British royalty.
A bunch of this has come out before. They looted all kinds of nations at the time of the British Empire. I mean,
Yeah, but this is World War II in the final days.
yeah,
The royals of Europe were in a castle that were on the Axis side in Germany. And they were all waiting for the last days of the war. The British came there and pretty much took all their jewels, money, cash, everything.
it's
Sounds
easy to
kind of
believe.
like the Nazis.
Yeah, it's easy to believe. I mean,
Yeah,
things like that have happened enough times. Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, we'll see. Information is coming out that's already been released, and there'll be more next year, quite a bit more. And in a couple years to follow, there'll be even more coming out on this. So if you're following World War II, a lot of the history that you might know needs to be rewritten.
yeah. Well, I think that's come a lot have come out about all the dirt on both sides of the Atlantic. World War
Yeah,
World War II was a lot less clean and moral than they make it sound in retrospect.
yeah, exactly. And the Japanese, I did a little bit, came out on the Japanese side of their version of, or their Dr. Mingala that was doing research on POWs and mostly British, but they rival Germany, or not worse, or even worse, because they were doing chemical weapon testing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And so when the war ended, the US went in there. We wanted all that research. So we pretty much covered up what they were doing so
Yeah.
we could get that information about chemical weapons.
Yeah. Yeah.
So war is never good.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of the Biden pardoning his son, right? That means he now is showing not as much moral high ground compared to the Republicans as they were pretending.
Yeah, so Sam, that's an interesting question. Why didn't he wait till the last day?
That would have been much better. Well,
Yes.
Biden just seems to be a selfish, egotistical jerk. I mean, why did he run for a second term when everybody knew he couldn't and he promised not to? You know, he just seems to have the same failing as any other politician. It's all about him getting power. And all of his
Yeah,
supposed
okay.
high-minded principles are pretty much uh, discardable window dressing. What really matters is just him being in charge, I'm afraid.
So it seems like we're entering into this era of the me generation.
Well, I think we always were, but
Oh, I think we're
it's
more so than ever.
well, it's certainly more in the open. And you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
the autocrats of the world always say everybody's corrupt, everybody's just taking bribes, so don't criticize me. I'm the better option. The other guys are just as bad. And unfortunately, when the other guys do decide to be bad, it's kind of hard to refute that.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
know, it does seem to be the corruption of our society. I've warned my students we're headed for a period of very outrageous government corruption, which I think we are. But on the bright side, working at my college, I've totally learned how to live in a totally corrupt administration. So
There you go.
it's
Americans are going to be at the disadvantage here because the Russians, the Ukrainians have been living with this for years.
yeah,
The Eastern Europeans have been living with corruption.
yep.
And this is something new to Americans.
It is. You know, I remember in the days of wooden ships, they just accepted in the British Army that the captain would just embezzle most of the money, so there weren't really supplies on the ship and all that. It's like they do in Russia. It was all that way. And you know, they're talking about one thing that's come up with Musk's Doge Committee. You know, the Pentagon failed their audit again. A large amount of the money given to the military just vanishes, and they can't account for it. So it sure looks like the same thing's happening here, and they've just been covering it up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I would pretty much agree with that.
Yeah, well, the one good thing, like the amazing thing to me in the Trump administration is the government failed, the courts failed, all of our checks and balances failed. But the only thing that didn't fail was the free press. You really had a bunch of reporters out there finding out what was happening and telling you if you cared. And we still seem to have a very strong free press. Although I'm watching MSNBC collapse, Joe and Mika bend the knee, uh, the Washington Post bends the knee. Our papers are in fact giving up their freedom, but there's independent online reporters that haven't been cowed yet. But I think, you know, if we lose the free press, then we'll really be doomed. Because I think that's the only part of our society that's actually working very well lately.
Yeah, and I don't think that's working very well. I think we're polarizing with story after story after story that's difficult to fact check.
Yeah, this is what Scott Galloway says. He says that everybody gets most of their news from social media, and the social media is being manipulated by
Yeah,
foreign actors to drive us into our corners. So yeah, yeah, there is some truth out there, but most people are not finding it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
And with AI, now you can create your own truth.
And it's not clear how to fix it. I mean, do you really want the government Ministry of Truth censoring everything to make sure it fits the government's party line? Would that really be an improvement?
Yeah, yeah,
No simple answer.
yeah. I don't have an answer. Anyway, that's a wrap for me
Yep. Yep. Also for me, so it'll be another one of these on Tuesday.
on Tuesday the 10th.
I
How's
suppose.
that?
Yeah. All right.